Welcome back to Second Screen. Today we're talking about the most brutal 12 yards in sports, the penalty kick. Because penalties look simple, and that's why they mess with people. One step, one strike, one keeper. Fans call it a lottery. Players call it pressure. And if you've ever watched a shootout, you already know the feeling. Your stomach drops before the ball even moves. But here's what I want to prove today. Penalties aren't luck. They're a psychological negotiation between a human brain and a threat, and the threat is designed to steal your attention, distort your perception, and force a decision at the worst possible time. And once you see the patterns, you'll start predicting misses like it's chess. Let me start with a real moment that everyone remembers: Wembley. The Euro 2020 final, played in July 2021, England versus Italy. It goes to penalties, and the whole stadium feels like it's holding its breath. Marcus Rashford steps up, stutters, and hits the post. Jadon Sancho's effort gets saved, and then Bukayo Saka's final penalty is saved by Gianluigi Donnarumma. Italy win the shootout. That entire sequence became a cultural shockwave overnight. Now, the internet version of that story is, they choked. But the real story is more interesting and more useful, because that shootout contains almost every pressure mechanism we're going to talk about today: tempo disruption, decision timing, attention drift, and the goalkeeper's ability to turn the moment into a threat response instead of a clean technical action. So here's the plan. I'm going to give you 3 layers of this mind game. Layer 1, the numbers, why penalties are not 50-50. Layer 2, the keeper's psychology, why keepers behave in ways that aren't always optimal and how that changes what shooters do. Layer 3, the shooter's brain, how attention and pressure literally change where people aim. And at the end, I'll give you a quick viewer cheat sheet, a few cues you can look for during any penalty to estimate whether a miss is more likely before the ball is struck. All right, layer 1, the numbers. Penalties are not a coin flip. There's actual research analyzing elite penalties that finds conversion rates around the high 60s during match play and around the low 70s in shootouts. Not identical, but importantly, nowhere near 50-50. One analysis of elite football penalties post-1997 reported roughly 68% conversion in match play and about 73% in shootouts. That's skill plus context. So why do we feel like it's random? Because the miss is louder than the make. A scored penalty is expected, so it disappears from memory. A missed penalty becomes identity. It becomes narrative. It becomes the moment. Our brains are built to remember shock and threat, and penalty kicks are basically threat theater. Now, layer 2, the goalkeeper's side of the game. Most fans think keepers just guess, but goalkeepers have their own psychology, and it matters because shooters react to it. There's a famous idea called action bias, and it shows up perfectly in penalties. Researchers looked at elite keepers and found something uncomfortable. Goalkeepers dive left or right far more than they stay in the center, even in situations where staying central could be statistically sensible given how shots are distributed. The explanation isn't "they're stupid." The explanation is psychological. Conceding after inaction feels worse than conceding after action because the social norm is to do something. So keepers are biased to act, to dive, because it protects them from looking frozen if the ball goes in. Read that again because it's the first big mind game twist. The keeper is not only trying to save the ball, the keeper is also trying to avoid the feeling and the public image of doing nothing. That pushes them toward movement and commitment. And shooters know this. Shooters grow up watching keepers dive. So a shooter walks up to the spot already believing the keeper will choose a side. And once you believe the keeper will choose a side, you face your first strategic fork. Do you commit early or do you react late? This is the classic penalty split: keeper independent versus keeper dependent. Keeper independent means you pick your corner early and you hit it with enough placement and pace that the keeper can't reach it. Your decision is locked. Your body commits. You're basically saying, "I don't care what you do." Keeper dependent means you delay the decision and you try to read the keeper. You're looking for the first hint of movement. You want the keeper to blink first. This is where you see stutters, pauses, slow run-ups. The shooter is trying to steal information. And both styles work, but they fail for different reasons. Keeper independent fails when a player doubts and tries to change direction late, because late changes wreck mechanics. Keeper dependent fails when the keeper refuses to commit early, or when the shooter waits too long and has to adjust mid-swing. Now, layer 3, the shooter's brain, is where the hacked part becomes real. Because keepers don't need magic, they need your attention. And in a penalty, attention is accuracy. There's a really important eye-tracking study where researchers tested what happens when the goalkeeper moves. Not dives, just moves in a distracting way, waving arms, shifting, being visually active. What they found is exactly what you'd expect if you understand anxiety. Penalty takers were more distracted by a moving keeper than a stationary one. They struggled to disengage their attention from the moving keeper under high threat. More penalties were saved when the goalkeeper moved, and shots tended to be hit closer to the keeper, more centrally, on those moving keeper trials. That's huge. It means the keeper isn't only guessing the corner, the keeper is trying to drag your shot into a more savable zone by stealing your focus. The keeper becomes a moving threat, and under threat, the brain prioritizes monitoring the threat over executing perfect fine motor control. So let's translate that into human terms. When you're calm, you can aim like a sniper. When you're anxious, your eyes flick to the threat, your body stiffens, and your precision becomes more conservative. Conservative placement often means closer to the center, not because you wanted to go center, but because your nervous system pulled you inward. Now go back to Wembley for a second. Rashford's stutter is not automatically wrong. Stutters can work, but stutters increase the timing complexity. You're trying to delay information, you're trying to manage your own rhythm, and the pressure is screaming at you. If the timing gets messy, the mechanics get messy. In that Euro final shootout, Rashford's stutter ended in the ball hitting the post, a miss that looks tiny on replay, but psychologically, it's the penalty in a nutshell, a millimeter-level action performed inside a hurricane. Now, I want to show you a second real example, because it proves penalties aren't random. The 2022 World Cup final, Argentina versus France, ends 3-3 after extra time and goes to penalties. In the shootout, Emiliano Martinez saves from Kingsley Coman, Aurelien Tchouameni misses, and Gonzalo Montiel converts the decisive kick as Argentina win 4-2 on penalties. That shootout wasn't luck either. It was a psychological duel with timing and threat and identity attached to it. And the reason these examples matter is because viewers remember them emotionally. We're not doing a sterile lecture, we're doing a show. The best way to understand the science is to connect it to moments your brain already stores as pressure. Now, one of the creepiest parts of this mind game is that you can be influenced without realizing it. There's research showing that goalkeepers who are imperceptibly off-center can influence penalty direction. Shooters are unlikely to consciously notice the keeper is off-center, but they tend to kick more toward the side of the goal that appears to offer slightly more space. That's not superstition, that's perception. So now the keeper has 3 tools. Action bias changes keeper behavior in general, movement steals attention, and subtle positioning can steer perception. And the shooter has one job: do not let your brain be dragged away from your target. But here's the part most videos get wrong. It's not simply, shooters should ignore the keeper. That advice is too simplistic because shooters have different strategies. If you are a keeper-dependent taker, you are literally choosing to monitor the keeper. You are saying, I'm going to react to you. And that can work, but it requires timing precision. This is why timing is the secret boss in penalties. There's research looking at World Cup and European Championship shootouts showing that success depends on the combination of the penalty takers and goalkeepers' temporal decision-making strategies. In plain English, it matters whether the shooter decides early or late, and whether the keeper commits early or late. The interaction changes the likelihood of scoring. So penalties are not just about where the ball goes. They're about who forces the other person to reveal their decision first. If the shooter can force the keeper to commit early, the shooter can place the ball away. If the keeper can delay commitment and remain a moving threat, the shooter's attention gets hijacked and placement drifts inward. Now let's talk about choking, because this is the headline everyone cares about. Choking is not a moral failure. It's not weak mentality. It's a predictable stress response. Under pressure, athletes often shift from an approach mindset, "I'm going to score," into an avoidance mindset, "I must not miss." Those sound similar, but they feel completely different in the body. Avoidance mindset produces stiffness, over-control, and conservative targeting. That's how you get the classic easy save penalty, mid-height, close to center, perfect for the keeper. It's not that the shooter wanted to shoot there, it's that their nervous system pulled them away from risk. And this is why the moving keeper research is so important. It gives you a mechanism for why anxious shooters shoot more centrally. They're struggling to disengage attention from the threat, and that disrupts aiming. Okay, now we're going to do this like a proper episode. Second screen rules. We're going to the tape, and we're going to build a viewer cheat sheet you can use during the next big shootout. Here's your cheat sheet, part 1. Shooter cues. Cue number 1. Busy eyes. If the shooter keeps glancing at the keeper late in the run-up, especially repeatedly, that's a sign attention is locked onto the threat. Under high pressure, that increases the chance of central drift. You're watching someone whose brain is negotiating instead of executing. Cue number 2. Tempo disruption. A smooth run-up usually signals an earlier commitment. A sudden slowdown or stutter can be a deliberate keeper-dependent strategy, which can work, but it also increases timing complexity and error risk if the shooter's rhythm collapses under pressure. That's why stutters are high variance. They're either ice-cold or disastrous. Cue number 3. Safe body. If the strike looks overly guided, overly controlled, like the player is steering instead of striking, you often get a central, savable penalty. In pressure moments, the body chooses "don't miss" instead of "score hard to save." Now, cheat sheet, part 2. Goalkeeper cues. Cue number 1. Movement. If the keeper is visually active, arms, steps, sway, they're trying to hijack attention. The moving keeper research suggests this can increase saves and centralize shots, especially under high threat. Cue number 2. Patience versus action bias. Most keepers are biased to dive because conceding after doing nothing feels worse socially. If you ever see a keeper who can hold patience and not commit too early, that keeper becomes much harder to beat because they're forcing the shooter to either commit early with pressure or react late with messy mechanics. Cue number 3. Subtle positioning. Even small off-center positioning can steer perception and influence direction without conscious awareness. And that's terrifying because it means the shooter can feel like they chose the corner freely while being gently nudged. Now let's bring it back to the biggest stage example, because we're making a show, not a textbook. 2006 World Cup Final, Italy versus France. Zidane scores a Panenka penalty early, Materazzi scores, it goes to extra time and eventually penalties. David Trezeguet hits the bar in the shootout, Fabio Grosso scores the winner, and Italy win 5-3 on penalties. That's a world final decided by a millimeter. But again, the lesson isn't bad luck. The lesson is, under maximum pressure, tiny changes in attention, perception, and timing decide history. That's why penalties are the most psychological moment in football, because the technical action is simple enough that the mind becomes the real battlefield. So here's the main takeaway for the audience, and it's the line that should live in your video like a theme song. A penalty is not a shot. It's a negotiation. And the winner is usually the person who controls attention and timing better. Now let me end with a clean, practical 3 rules summary, the kind that makes people comment, "This is so true." If you're the shooter, Rule 1. Decide earlier than you think you should. Late decisions create late mechanics. Rule 2. Don't let your eyes get dragged into a staring contest. One glance is fine, but constant checking is danger. Rule 3. Don't aim safe. Safe is central. Safe is savable. If you're the keeper, Rule 1. Remember action bias. Don't dive just to look busy. Your job is to win, not to look like you tried. Rule 2. Movement can be a weapon because attention is limited. Rule 3. Tiny cues matter. Positioning can influence perception more than people think. And for you, the viewer, next time there's a shootout, don't watch the ball. Watch the eyes. Watch the tempo. Watch the keeper's behavior. You'll start spotting the pattern because it's not luck. If you want a Part 2 episode, we can do the exact same breakdown for NBA free throws under pressure, clutch threes, or even tennis match points, because the brain under threat behaves the same across sports. Drop a comment. What's the most painful penalty miss you've ever watched? And if you enjoyed this, subscribe, because the next time you hear, "It's a lottery," you'll know better.